and 2,500 words. David Miller stood in the gleaming lobby of Hartwell Global Enterprises, his worn shoes squeaking slightly on the marble floor, and wondered if coming here had been a mistake. His interview was in 10 minutes, and he could already see the receptionist's eyes flicking over his 15-year-old suit jacket and the frayed edges of his resume folder. He was 45 years old, looked 50, and was about to interview for a translator position at one of the most prestigious international consulting firms in Boston. The CEO herself would be conducting the interview. Victoria Hartwell, the 30-year-old business prodigy who'd inherited her father's company at 25 and had tripled its value in just 5 years. David had seen her photo in business magazines, always impeccably dressed, always confident, always surrounded by success. He probably looked like someone who'd wandered in from a homeless shelter, but he needed this job desperately. His daughter Emma needed surgery, the kind that insurance barely covered, and the medical bills were drowning him. So here he stood, clutching his folder, about to tell a billionaire CEO that he spoke 9 languages and hoped she wouldn't laugh him out of the building. What David didn't know was that in exactly 17 minutes, he would save Victoria Hartwell from signing a contract that would have bankrupted her entire company. And what neither of them knew was that this interview would be the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. Don't you dare scroll away now. Hit that subscribe button because this story is about to get wild and you need to see what happens next. We know you've been watching our videos, so subscribe right now and turn on those notifications so you don't miss a single twist. And comment below where you're watching from. We want to hear from every corner of the world. David had arrived 30 minutes early, partly because he always did, and partly because he'd taken 2 buses and a subway to get here and couldn't risk being late. He sat in the waiting area surrounded by other candidates, younger people in expensive suits, carrying leather portfolios, tapping on tablets and smartphones. He had a flip phone that he'd bought at a discount store 3 years ago. It made calls. That was enough. The receptionist called his name. "Mr. Miller, Ms. Hartwell will see you now." David stood, smoothed down his jacket, and followed her down a corridor, lined with awards and photos of Victoria Hartwell shaking hands with world leaders, signing deals in exotic locations, speaking at international conferences. This woman lived in a completely different universe than he did. The receptionist opened a door to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. And there she was. Victoria Hartwell stood by the window, silhouetted against the morning light, even more striking in person than in her photos. She had golden blonde, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, sharp blue eyes, and wore a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than David's monthly rent. She turned as he entered, and he saw her expression shift subtly as she took in his appearance. Not disgust exactly, but a flicker of something. Surprise, maybe, or doubt. "Mr. Miller, please sit down." Her voice was crisp, professional, with the confidence of someone who'd never had to worry about where her next meal was coming from. David sat in the chair, across from her massive desk, trying not to feel intimidated by the expensive art on the walls or the view or the woman herself. Victoria settled into her chair and opened a folder. His application. "So, David Miller, your resume is interesting. You're applying for our international translator position, but your work history shows you've been driving for a rideshare company for the past 6 years." "Yes, ma'am. It's flexible work that allows me to care for my daughter." "And before that, you were," she scanned the page, "a freelance translator. No formal employment, no references from established firms, no university degree listed." She looked up at him. "Yet you claim to speak 9 languages fluently." The way she said "claim" made it clear she didn't believe him. "I do speak 9 languages, Ms. Hartwell." She leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing at her lips. 9 languages. That's quite impressive. Most people struggle with 1 or 2. What are these 9 languages? English, Spanish, Arabic, French, Portuguese, Mandarin Chinese, German, Russian, and Italian. Victoria's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "And where exactly did you learn all these languages, Mr. Miller? I don't see any degrees from language institutes or study abroad programs on your resume." David had known this question would come. He always struggled with how to answer it without sounding like he was making excuses or looking for sympathy. I learned them growing up. My mother was a missionary, and we traveled extensively when I was young. I picked up languages naturally, and I continued studying on my own as an adult. Self-taught, Victoria said. And it wasn't a question. It was a dismissal. Mr. Miller, I appreciate you coming in, but Hartwell Global works with Fortune 500 companies, international governments, and high-stakes negotiations. We need translators with credentials, with proven track records, with degrees from recognized institutions, not someone who's self-taught and has been driving people to the airport for the past 6 years. David felt his chest tighten. He'd known this was a long shot, but he'd hoped. Foolishly, he'd hoped. I understand, Miss Hartwell, but I can prove my abilities if you'll give me a chance. Test me in any of those languages. Give me a document to translate. I'll show you. That won't be necessary. Victoria stood up, signaling the interview was over. Thank you for your time. David stood too, but something made him speak again. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the thought of Emma waiting at home, needing that surgery. Maybe it was just years of being dismissed and overlooked, finally breaking through his carefully maintained politeness. With respect, Miss Hartwell, you're making a mistake. Her eyebrows rose. Excuse me? You're judging me based on appearances and credentials rather than actual ability. That's a lazy way to evaluate talent. Victoria's expression hardened. Mr. Miller, I think you should leave now. In a moment. But first, let me ask you something. That contract on your desk, the one with Arabic text on the top page, have you signed it yet? Victoria glanced at her desk where, indeed, a contract sat waiting for her signature. That's none of your business. It's a partnership agreement with Al Rahman Investment Group, isn't it? I recognize their letterhead. Are you planning to sign it today? How do you know about that? It was mentioned in your company's press release last week. $200 million joint venture to expand into Middle Eastern markets. David took a step closer to the desk. Has anyone actually read the Arabic version of that contract? Of course. Our legal team reviewed it thoroughly. Did they? Because I can see 3 lines of Arabic text from here. And unless I'm very much mistaken, there's a clause in there that's going to cause you serious problems. Victoria stared at him. You can read that from where you're standing? The text is fairly large, and I've been reading Arabic for 30 years. Miss Hartwell, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm trying to help you. Let me look at that contract. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize and leave. If I'm right, then maybe you'll reconsider your evaluation of my abilities. For a long moment, Victoria didn't move. David could see her weighing the options, calculating the risk. Finally, she picked up the contract and held it out to him. You have 5 minutes. Tell me what you see? David took the contract and began reading, his eyes moving quickly across the Arabic script. It took him less than 2 minutes to find it. Here, he pointed to a section in the middle of page 7. This clause states that Al Rahman Investment Group retains the right to access and utilize any proprietary technology developed by Hartwell Global during the partnership period, with no additional compensation beyond the initial investment. And here, he flipped to page 12. This clause defines partnership period as extending for 15 years beyond the termination of the formal agreement. Victoria grabbed the contract and stared at the Arabic text, her face going pale. That's not what the English version says. I'm sure it's not. The English version probably describes a standard joint venture with clear boundaries on intellectual property. The Arabic version is a trap. You sign this, and they get access to everything your company develops for the next 15 years, plus, however long the partnership actually lasts. They're not investing in your company. They're buying the rights to your future innovations for a fraction of what they're worth. Victoria sank back into her chair, the contract trembling slightly in her hands. Our legal team reviewed this. Our Arabic translator reviewed this. How did they miss it? Because reading words and understanding context are 2 different things. The clause is written in formal Arabic with legal terminology that can be interpreted multiple ways. If your translator did a literal translation without understanding the legal implications, they'd miss the trap, and your legal team wouldn't catch it because they can't read Arabic themselves. Victoria looked up at him, and David saw her expression had completely changed. The dismissive confidence was gone, replaced by something like shock and grudging respect. You just saved my company from disaster. I just did what you hired your team to do. They should have caught it. Victoria stood up and walked to her window, staring out at the harbor. I was going to sign this tomorrow. We have a ceremony planned, press coverage, the whole production. If you hadn't said something, she turned back to him. Why did you? You could have let me dismiss you. Let me make this mistake. It would have served me right for judging you so quickly. Because it's not about you and me, Miss Hartwell. It's about doing what's right. And because I know what it's like to make mistakes that cost everything. What do you mean? David hesitated. He didn't usually talk about his past, but something about this moment, about the way Victoria was looking at him now with genuine curiosity instead of dismissal, made him want to be honest. 10 years ago, I was working as a freelance translator. I was good at it, making decent money, providing for my wife and daughter. Then I made a mistake on a contract translation for a client. It wasn't a major error, just a misunderstanding of a technical term, but it cost them $50,000 in a failed negotiation. They sued me, and I didn't have insurance to cover it. Lost everything. My wife left, took most of what we had in the settlement. I've been rebuilding ever since, but with that lawsuit on my record, no reputable firm will hire me. So you drive for rideshare companies. It pays the bills, usually. David didn't mention the medical bills, the mounting debt, the surgery Emma needed that he couldn't afford. Victoria studied him for a long moment. Sit down, Mr. Miller. Let's start this interview over. For the next hour, Victoria tested David's language abilities. She pulled up documents in French, had him translate technical specifications from German, asked him to interpret a Mandarin business proposal. She called in her Chinese business partner via video conference and had David conduct a negotiation in Mandarin. She brought in her head of legal, showed him the Arabic contract, and had David explain the problematic clauses in detail. By the end of it, the head of legal was shaking David's hand vigorously. Mr. Miller, you just saved us from what would have been the worst contract disaster in this company's history. How did our translator miss this? Your translator probably did a competent job with the basic translation, but they didn't understand the legal implications or the cultural context. In Arab business culture, there are layers of meaning that don't always translate directly. You need someone who understands both the language and the culture. After the legal head left, Victoria leaned back in her chair and looked at David with an expression he couldn't quite read. I owe you an apology, Mr. Miller. I judged you based on your appearance and your resume without giving you a fair chance. That was wrong. I'm used to it. That doesn't make it right. She paused. I want to offer you a job, but not the translator position you applied for. David's heart sank. I understand. No, I don't think you do. The translator position pays $60,000 a year. I want to offer you the position of Director of International Languages and Cultural Consulting. You'd oversee all our translation work, conduct cultural sensitivity training for our executives, and personally handle our most important international contracts. The salary is $180,000 a year, plus full benefits and a signing bonus of $25,000. David stared at her, certain he'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? You heard me correctly. You have skills this company desperately needs, skills I didn't even know we were missing until you walked through that door. I'd be a fool to let you leave. Ms. Hartwell, I don't have a college degree. I don't have the credentials for a director-level position. You have something better than credentials. You have actual ability, and you have integrity. You could have walked away when I dismissed you, but you stopped. To help anyway. That tells me more about your character than any degree could. David felt tears threatening. He blinked them back. I have a daughter. She needs surgery, and the medical bills are... Our health insurance is comprehensive. It'll cover whatever she needs, and the signing bonus should help with any immediate expenses. Victoria stood and extended her hand. What do you say, Mr. Miller? Will you accept? David stood and shook her hand, unable to speak for a moment. Yes, I accept. Victoria smiled, and this time it was genuine, warm. Good. Welcome to Hartwell Global Enterprises. Can you start Monday? I can start tomorrow if you need me. Monday is fine. That gives you time to give notice to the rideshare company and get your affairs in order. She walked him to the door. And Mr. Miller, thank you for stopping me from making a catastrophic mistake, for being honest even when it didn't benefit you, for reminding me that the most valuable people aren't always the ones with the most impressive resumes. David walked out of that office building feeling like he was floating. $25,000 signing bonus, $180,000 a year. Emma's surgery covered. Everything changing, all because he'd refused to stay quiet when he saw someone about to make a terrible mistake. He called Emma from the lobby. "Sweetheart, I got it. I got the job. A better job than I even applied for. We're going to be okay. Your surgery, everything, it's all going to be okay." He heard her crying on the other end of the line, heard the relief and joy in her voice. "Dad, really? You're not joking?" "Really, baby. I promise. Everything's going to be different now." What David didn't know as he left that building was that Victoria Hartwell stood at her window watching him go, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. She'd built her entire career on being smart, being tough, being right. Today she'd been wrong, and it had taken a middle-aged rideshare driver to show her. That should have embarrassed her. Instead, it intrigued her. David's first day at Hartwell Global Enterprises started with a knock on his apartment door at 6 in the morning. He opened it to find a delivery person holding 3 large boxes. "David Miller, delivery from Hartwell Global." Inside the boxes were 5 new suits, dress shirts, ties, shoes, and a note in Victoria's handwriting. "Can't have my Director of International Languages showing up in a IE 15-year-old suit. These are a welcome gift, not charity. See you at 9. VH." David stood in his tiny living room holding the note, feeling a complicated mix of gratitude and embarrassment. He'd never had anyone buy him clothes before, but as he tried on one of the suits, a charcoal gray that fit him perfectly, he had to admit it felt good to look professional again, to look like he belonged in the world he was about to enter. Emma came out of her bedroom, still in her pajamas, and stopped short when she saw him. "Dad? Wow, you look like a different person." "I feel like a different person." He did a awkward spin. "Too much? It's perfect. You look like the dad I remember from when I was little, before everything got hard." That hit him right in the chest. "Things are going to be better now, Em, I promise." "I know. I believe you." At Hartwell Global, David was given a corner office on the same floor as Victoria's, with a view of the harbor and furniture that probably cost more than his car. His assistant, an efficient young woman named Rebecca, walked him through his schedule for the week. "Miss Hartwell wants you to review all pending international contracts by Friday. She's also scheduled you to give a presentation to the executive team on Wednesday about cultural sensitivity in international business. And you have lunch with her today at noon to discuss the Al-Rahman situation." "Lunch with Miss Hartwell?" "She has lunch meetings with all her directors. Regularly. It's how she keeps up with what's happening in each department." Rebecca smiled. "Don't worry, she's actually really easy to talk to once you get past the intimidating CEO exterior." David spent the morning reviewing contracts in 6 different languages, finding minor issues in 3 of them, and one major problem in a French contract that would have created tax complications. He sent detailed memos to the legal department, feeling more energized than he had in years. This was what he was meant to do. This was where his skills actually mattered. At noon, Rebecca escorted him to a private dining room where Victoria was already seated, reviewing something on her tablet. She looked up when he entered and smiled. "David, good. You're here. Please sit. I hope you like Italian. I had Giuseppe's cater." "I like anything I don't have to cook myself," David said, then immediately worried that sounded too casual. But Victoria laughed. "Honest answer, I like that." She poured them, both water from a crystal pitcher. "So how's your first morning going?" "I found issues in 4 contracts already. Sent memos to legal." Victoria's eyebrows rose. 4? In one morning? None as serious as the Al-Rahman situation, but yes. Your translation team is competent at basic translation, but they're missing context and cultural implications. That's exactly why I hired you. A server brought their food, pasta that smelled incredible. I wanted to talk to you about Al-Rahman. I had a very uncomfortable conversation with Ahmed Al-Rahman this morning. How did he react when you pointed out the contract issues? He denied knowing anything about the problematic clauses. Said his legal team must have added them without his knowledge. Victoria twirled pasta on her fork. I don't believe him. I think he knew exactly what was in that contract and was hoping I wouldn't catch it. That's likely. The clauses were too strategic to be accidental. So I told him we need to renegotiate from scratch, with you personally reviewing every word in both English and Arabic. He wasn't happy, but he agreed. He's flying in next week to meet with us. David paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. He's coming here to meet with me, with us. You'll be in all the negotiation meetings. That's part of your job now. Victoria studied him. Does that make you nervous? Honestly, yes. I'm used to working behind the scenes, just translating documents. I'm not used to sitting across from billionaire investors. You sat across from me and told me I was making a mistake. You can handle Ahmed al-Rahman. She took a sip of water. Besides, I need you there. You understand the language and the culture in ways I don't. You'll catch things I miss. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Victoria asked, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Your wife. You mentioned she left after the lawsuit. Do you still have contact with her?" David shook his head. "She remarried 2 years ago, moved to California with her new husband. She calls Emma on birthdays and holidays, but that's about it. The divorce was difficult. She blamed me for losing everything, and she wasn't wrong. I did make the mistake that cost us. One mistake shouldn't define your entire life. Try telling that to the companies who refused to hire me. Try telling that to the collection agencies who called every day." David set down his fork. "I'm sorry. This is probably too heavy. For a business lunch?" "No, I asked. And I want to understand the people who work for me. Not just their skills, but who they are." Victoria leaned back in her chair. "Can I tell you something? About why I was so dismissive of you during your interview? You don't owe me an explanation. I know. But I want to give you one anyway." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "My father built this company from nothing. He died 5 years ago and left it to me. And everyone said I'd run it into the ground within a year. They said I was too young, too inexperienced, too focused on appearances instead of substance. So I became obsessed with credentials, with hiring people from the best schools, with building a team that looked impressive on paper. I thought that would prove I deserved to be here. And did it? It built a successful company. But it also made me overlook people like you. People with real talent who just didn't fit the conventional mold. You taught me that in 5 minutes. That's worth more than any business degree." David felt something shift between them. This wasn't just a boss having lunch with an employee. This was two people being genuinely honest with each other. "Thank you for giving me a chance," he said quietly. "You didn't have to. You could have just thanked me for catching the contract issue and sent me on my way. That would have been a waste of talent. I don't like wasting things." Victoria smiled. "Besides, something tells me you're going to make this company a lot better. And not just because you can read 9 languages." Over the next 2 weeks, David proved her right. He overhauled the entire translation department, implemented new protocols for reviewing international contracts, and gave a presentation on cultural sensitivity that had executives taking notes like students. He worked closely with Victoria on preparing for Ahmed al-Rahman's visit, researching Arab business culture, and coaching her on negotiation tactics. But something else was happening too. Something neither of them had planned for. It started with small things. Victoria stopping by his office to ask his opinion on matters that had nothing to do with translation. David staying late to help her prepare for meetings. Their conversations drifting from business to personal topics. Shared laughs over coffee. Exchanged glances during boring executive meetings that said, "Can you believe this?" without words. Rebecca noticed first. "You know," she said to David one afternoon, "I've worked for Ms. Hartwell for 3 years and I've never seen her smile as much as she does when she's talking to you." David felt his face heat up. "We're just colleagues." "Sure you are." Rebecca's smile was knowing. Just colleagues who have lunch together every day and stay late working together and look at each other like, well, never mind. None of my business. But it was becoming David's business, whether he wanted it to be or not. He was developing feelings for Victoria Hartwell, and that was a complication he hadn't anticipated. She was his boss. She was a billionaire CEO 15 years younger than him. She lived in a penthouse apartment and drove a Tesla and wore designer clothes. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Dorchester and took the subway and still counted pennies at the grocery store, out of habit. The gap between their worlds was enormous, and David knew better than to think it could be bridged, except Victoria seemed to be thinking the same thoughts. It happened one evening when they were working late. reviewing the renegotiated Al-Rahman contract before the signing ceremony the next day. They were alone in Victoria's office, the city lights glittering below them, and Victoria suddenly set down her pen and looked at him. "Can I ask you something that has nothing to do with work?" David's heart rate picked up. "Okay. Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you hadn't made that mistake 10 years ago? If you'd stayed on the path you were on?" "Sometimes. But honestly, if I hadn't made that mistake, I wouldn't have learned the lessons I needed to learn. I wouldn't have developed the empathy I have now. I wouldn't be here. Do you regret it? The path you took?" "I regret the pain it caused my daughter. I regret the years of struggle, but I don't regret who I became because of it." He paused. "Why are you asking?" Victoria stood and walked to her window, her back to him. "Because I've spent my entire adult life on one path. The perfect daughter, the perfect student, the perfect CEO. I've made all the right choices, dated all the right people, built all the right connections, and I'm successful and respected and completely empty." She turned to face him. "Then you walked into my office with your worn suit and your ridiculous claim about speaking 9 languages, and you called me out for being lazy in my evaluation of talent, and you saved my company, and every day since then, you've made me laugh and challenged me and treated me like a person instead of a title. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" David stood slowly. "Victoria, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I think about you when I'm not supposed to be thinking about you. I'm saying that I look forward to our lunch meetings more than I should. I'm saying that I'm developing feelings for you that are completely inappropriate, given that I'm your boss, and we have this massive power imbalance, and I feel the same." "Wait," David interrupted. Victoria stopped mid-sentence. "You do? I do. And I've been telling myself all the same things, that it's inappropriate, that we're from different worlds, that you're my boss, and this could never work." He took a step closer to her. "But I can't seem to stop feeling it anyway." They stood there in her office, the city glittering below them, the space between them charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. "This is a terrible idea," Victoria said softly. "Absolutely terrible," David agreed. "We could both get hurt. The company could face scrutiny. People will say you're only here because of a personal relationship. All of that is true. We should be professional. Keep things strictly business. We should." Neither of them moved away. "David," Victoria said, and her voice was barely a whisper. "What are we doing?" "I have no idea, but I don't want to stop." Victoria closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, like they were both testing whether this was real or just a moment of temporary insanity. But then David's hand came up to cup her face, and Victoria's fingers tangled in his hair, and the kiss deepened into something that felt inevitable and terrifying and absolutely right. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Victoria laughed shakily. "Well, that happened. That definitely happened." David's mind was racing. "Victoria, we need to talk about this. About what this means." "I know, but not tonight. Tonight I just want to feel this without overthinking it." She kissed him again, softer this time. "Is that okay?" "That's okay." They spent the next hour in her office talking about everything except work. Victoria told him about the pressure of inheriting her father's company so young, about the loneliness of being at the top, about how she'd forgotten what it felt like to connect with someone who saw her instead of her title. David told her about Emma's dreams of becoming a teacher, about the small joys he'd found even in the hardest years, about how scared he was of messing this up because she mattered more than any job ever could. "You're not going to mess this up," Victoria said, her head resting on his shoulder as they sat on her office couch. "We're in this together, whatever happens. Your board of directors is going to have a field day when they find out the CEO is dating an employee. Let them. I'll remind them that said employee saved the company from a $200 million disaster." She lifted her head to look at him. "David, I'm not going to hide this. I'm not going to pretend we're just colleagues if this becomes something real. But we need to be smart about it. Transparent. Make sure there's no appearance of impropriety." "Agreed. And I need to make sure Emma's okay with this. She's been through enough without me complicating things." "Of course. Your daughter comes first. Always." Victoria checked her watch and sighed. "It's almost midnight. We should probably go home." "Probably." Neither of them moved. Finally, Victoria stood and held out her hand. Come on, I'll walk you out. They rode the elevator down together, hands linked, both of them grinning like teenagers who just discovered something wonderful and forbidden. In the lobby, Victoria kissed him one more time before he headed for the subway. See you tomorrow for the Al Rahman signing, she said. Wouldn't miss it. David practically floated home on the subway. When he got to his apartment, Emma was still awake, studying at the kitchen table. Dad, it's after midnight. Where have you been? David sat down across from her, trying to figure out how to explain. Working late, and something happened. Emma set down her pen. What kind of something? The kind where your father might be dating his boss. Emma's eyes went wide. Ms. Hartwell? The CEO? Dad! I know. It's complicated. Complicated? Dad, she's like 15 years younger than you and a billionaire and your boss. That's not complicated, that's insane. But Emma was smiling. Tell me everything. They stayed up until 2 in the morning. David telling Emma about the kiss, about the conversation, about his feelings for Victoria and hers for him. Emma listened, asked questions, and finally gave her blessing. Dad, you've been alone for 10 years. You've sacrificed everything for me. If you found someone who makes you happy, even if it's complicated, I think you should go for it. She hugged him. Just promise me you'll be careful. I don't want to see you get hurt again. I promise, sweetheart. The next morning, David arrived at the office to find a media circus waiting. The Al Rahman signing ceremony was being covered by business press from around the world. Ahmed Al Rahman himself was already there, surrounded by his advisors, looking considerably less pleased than he had before David had exposed the contract trap. Victoria pulled David aside before they entered the conference room. Ready for this? As ready as I'll ever be. Good, because Ahmed specifically asked that you be present during the signing. He wants to meet the person who caught what his team tried to do. The signing ceremony was tense. Ahmed Al Rahman was polite, but cool as he shook David's hand. Mr. Miller, Ahmed Al Rahman, I understand I have you to thank for the revisions to our agreement. David replied in flawless Arabic. I simply ensured that both parties understood exactly what they were agreeing to. Transparency benefits everyone. Ahmed's expression flickered with surprise and respect. Your Arabic is exceptional. Where did you study? I've been fortunate to learn from many teachers, both formal and informal. They conducted the rest of the negotiation in Arabic, with David translating for Victoria and the other English speakers in the room. By the end, they'd reached an agreement that was genuinely fair to both sides. Not the trap the original contract had been, but a real partnership based on mutual benefit. As they were signing the final documents, Ahmed looked at Victoria and said in Arabic, not realizing David would translate, You're fortunate to have someone with his skills. Hold on to him. Victoria smiled and replied in English, I intend to. After the ceremony, after the photos and the press conferences and the handshakes, Victoria and David stood alone in her office. We did it, she said. Fair deal, good press, company protected. We make a good team. We do. Victoria hesitated. David, about last night. I meant what I said, all of it. But I also need you to know that this is real for me. This isn't just some fling or a power trip. I'm genuinely falling for you, and that terrifies me. David crossed the room and took her hands. It terrifies me too, but I'm falling for you as well. So we'll just have to be terrified together. I can live with that. They kissed again, and this time it felt like a promise. Like the beginning of something that neither of them had planned, but both of them needed. Outside the window, Boston Harbor sparkled in the afternoon sun. Somewhere in the building, people were working on contracts and deals and negotiations. But in that moment, in that office, two people from completely different worlds had found something neither of them had expected, and they were both brave enough to reach for it. 3 months into their relationship, David and Victoria were trying to figure out how to navigate a romance that defied every corporate handbook and social expectation. They'd been careful at first, keeping things private, but word had inevitably spread through the office. Some people were supportive. Others whispered that David was using Victoria for her money, or that Victoria was having a midlife crisis at 30. The whispers bothered David more than he wanted to admit. It came to a head one afternoon when he overheard 2 junior executives talking in the break room. He'd come in to refill his coffee and heard his name before they realized he was there. I'm just saying it's convenient that Miller suddenly got this huge promotion right around the time he started sleeping with the boss. Come on, he saved the company from that Saudi deal. He earned the position. Did he? Or did he just get lucky that Victoria needed a translator that day? I've been here 5 years and I'm still a junior analyst. This guy shows up and 3 months later, he's a director dating the CEO. Tell me that's not suspicious. David cleared his throat loudly as he entered. Both executives turned red and quickly left. But the words stayed with him. Was that what people thought? That he'd manipulated his way into this position, into Victoria's life. That evening he was quieter than usual during their standing dinner at Victoria's penthouse apartment. She noticed immediately. What's wrong? You've barely touched your food. Just thinking. About? David set down his fork. Do you ever wonder if people are right? That maybe I'm taking advantage of the situation? Victoria's expression hardened. Who said that to you? No one directly. I hear things. People think I'm using you, that I don't deserve this position or this life or you. And what do you think? I think they might have a point. 3 months ago, I was driving for rideshare companies. Now I'm living in a world I never could have imagined, dating a woman who's brilliant and successful and completely out of my league. Stop. Victoria stood up and walked around the table to him. First of all, I'm not out of your league. We're equals in this relationship. Second, you're not living this life because of me. You're living it because you have exceptional skills that you've been using to make my company better every single day. Third, anyone who thinks you're using me doesn't know either of us at all. But Victoria, look at the optics. You're my boss. You control my salary, my position. Then let's change that. Victoria pulled out her phone and sent a quick text. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. We're going to address this head on. What are you planning? You'll see. The next afternoon, David found himself sitting in a conference room with Victoria's entire board of directors. 8 powerful people who controlled the future of Hartwell Global. Victoria stood at the head of the table, projecting confidence that David wasn't sure he felt. Thank you all for coming on short notice. I've called this meeting to discuss my relationship with David Miller and to propose some structural changes to address any concerns about conflicts of interest. One of the board members, an older man named Richard Preston, leaned forward. Miss Hartwell, while we appreciate your transparency, the board is indeed concerned. Workplace romances between executives create liability issues. When one person has direct authority over the other, it becomes even more problematic. I agree completely, Victoria said, which is why I'm proposing that David's position be restructured. He would no longer report directly to me. Instead, he'd report to the board through a newly created International Operations Committee. His salary and performance reviews would be determined by that committee, not by me. This removes any appearance that our personal relationship affects his professional standing. The board members looked at each other. Margaret Chen, the CFO, spoke up. That's a reasonable solution, but Miss Hartwell, you must understand our concern. If this relationship ends badly, it could create a hostile work environment. Mr. Miller could claim he was coerced or pressured. I would never do that, David interrupted. All eyes turned to him. He took a breath and continued. I understand your concerns. I know how this looks, but I want to make something clear. Victoria, Miss Hartwell, didn't pursue me. We developed feelings for each other organically. She's never used her position to pressure me into anything. And if our relationship ends, I would leave the company rather than create problems for her or for Hartwell Global. You'd give up a 6-figure salary and walk away? Richard asked skeptically. Without hesitation. My integrity isn't for sale, and neither is hers. I took this job because I'm good at what I do, not because I'm dating the CEO. In fact, I got the job before we ever even had our first kiss. Victoria smiled at him, then turned back to the board. I'm asking you to trust us. Trust that we're both professionals who can separate our personal and professional lives. Trust that David has earned his position through merit. And trust that I wouldn't risk this company's reputation for anything less than something real and meaningful. The board went into a closed session to discuss. David and Victoria waited outside in the hallway. You didn't have to offer to quit, Victoria said quietly. Yes, I did. Because it's true. You're more important than any job. David, you need this job. Emma's surgery is already paid for. Emma's future is secure. If I have to go back to driving rideshare to protect your reputation, I'll do it. Victoria took his hand. You're not going back to anything. We're going to make this work. 20 minutes later, the board called them back in. Margaret Chen spoke for the group. We've decided to approve Miss Hartwell's proposal. Mr. Miller's position will be restructured as she suggested. However, we're also implementing a transparency policy. You'll both be required to disclose this relationship publicly, both internally and in company communications. We won't hide it, but we won't let it become a scandal either. Is that acceptable? Victoria and David looked at each other and nodded. It's acceptable, Victoria said. Thank you for your trust. That evening, Hartwell Global sent out a company-wide memo announcing that CEO Victoria Hartwell and Director of International Operations David Miller were in a relationship, that appropriate measures had been taken to prevent any conflicts of interest, and that both parties maintained the full support of the board. The memo also detailed David's accomplishments over the past 3 months, the contracts he'd saved, the money he'd recovered, the improvements he'd made to the translation department. The response was mixed. Some employees were supportive, others remained skeptical, but at least now, everything was out in the open. Emma had her own opinions when David told her what had happened. Dad, I'm proud of you for being honest, but I'm also worried. What if people never accept this? What if you're always going to be the guy who dated the boss? Then that's something I'll have to live with. But Em, I love her, really love her. And sometimes loving someone means accepting the complications that come with it. Emma hugged him. As long as you're happy, that's all that matters to me. Over the next few months, David and Victoria settled into a rhythm. They were careful to maintain professionalism at work, but they didn't hide their relationship either. They had lunch together in the company cafeteria where everyone could see. They attended company events as a couple. They were transparent and unapologetic. Slowly, the whispers died down. People began to see that David really was good at his job, that he was making genuine contributions to the company's success. When he successfully negotiated a partnership with a Brazilian firm that had been stalled for 2 years because of translation issues, even the skeptics had to admit he'd earned his position. But the real test came 6 months into their relationship when Victoria's mother, Patricia Hartwell, came to visit. Patricia was everything David had feared. Old money, impeccable breeding, the kind of woman who could make you feel inferior without saying a word. She'd flown in from her estate in Connecticut specifically to meet this man Victoria has been seeing. Victoria had warned him. My mother is difficult. She has very specific ideas about who I should be dating. Specifically, someone from our social circle with the right family connections. So, not a former rideshare driver. Definitely not a former rideshare driver. But David, I don't care what she thinks. I just need you to know that whatever she says, it doesn't change how I feel about you. The dinner was at an exclusive restaurant that probably had a 6-month waiting list. Patricia Hartwell arrived in a chauffeur-driven car, wearing pearls and judgment in equal measure. She looked at David the way someone might look at an interesting insect. Mr. Miller, how interesting to finally meet you. Mrs. Hartwell, thank you for joining us. They sat down, and Patricia immediately began what could only be described as an interrogation disguised as polite dinner conversation. So, David, Victoria tells me you speak several languages. Where did you attend university? I didn't attend university, Mrs. Hartwell. I learned languages through travel and self-study. I see. And your family? What do they do? My mother passed away when I was young. My father remarried and moved to Florida. We're not close. How unfortunate. Patricia's tone suggested it was unfortunate for him, not her. And you have a daughter from a previous marriage. Yes, Emma, she's 17 and planning to attend college next year to study education. Education? How practical. Patricia took a sip of her wine. Victoria, dear, have you given any thought to what we discussed? About Alexander Pemberton? His family owns mother. Victoria's voice was sharp. I'm not interested in Alexander Pemberton. I'm with David. Yes, but surely you can see this is just a phase. David seems like a nice enough man. But really, Victoria, he has no family connections, no university education, no? Mother, stop! Victoria set down her fork. David saved my company from disaster. He speaks 9 languages fluently. He's brilliant, kind, and treats me like a person instead of a status symbol. That's worth more than all of Alexander Pemberton's family connections combined." Patricia turned her cold gaze on David. "Is it true you were working as a driver before Victoria hired you?" "Yes, ma'am. I drove for a rideshare company to support my daughter. And now you're dating your boss and earning a substantial salary from her company. Forgive me for being blunt, but it looks rather opportunistic." David had known this was coming. He'd prepared for it, but hearing it said so directly still stung. "Mrs. Hartwell, I understand why you'd think that. If I were in your position, I might think the same thing. But I'd like to tell you about the day I met your daughter." For the next 20 minutes, David told Patricia the whole story. The interview where Victoria had dismissed him, the Arabic contract he'd read to, save her company, the job offer he'd accepted not knowing it would lead to anything personal, the months of working together before their relationship began. He spoke in English, but halfway through, he switched to perfect French, Patricia's native language, to make a point about cultural understanding. "Your daughter didn't fall for a driver or a poor man trying to climb the social ladder," David said, still in French. "She fell for someone who challenged her, who saw her as more than her title, who could match her intellectually and call her out when she was wrong. And I fell for a woman who's brilliant and driven and brave enough to love someone, even when it's complicated. That's not opportunism. That's just love." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she replied in French, "Your accent is Parisian. Where did you learn it?" "My mother and I lived in Paris for 2 years when I was 12. I attended a local school, made French friends, absorbed the language and culture." "And the other languages?" "Similar stories. Arabic from 2 years in Cairo, Mandarin from time in Beijing. Each language came with its own journey, its own story." David switched back to English. "Mrs. Hartwell, I know I'm not what you imagined for Victoria. I know I don't have the right background or the right connections, but I love your daughter, and I make her happy. That has to count for something." Patricia studied him with an expression that was impossible to read. Finally, she turned to Victoria. "He speaks 9 languages?" "9, Victoria confirmed. "And he really saved your company." "He really did," Patricia sighed. "Well, I suppose if you're going to date an unsuitable man, at least he's an interesting, unsuitable man." She looked at David. "Mr. Miller, I'm not going to pretend I approve of this relationship. You're not what I wanted for my daughter. But Victoria has always been stubborn, and I can see she's made up her mind. So I'll say this. If you hurt her, if you take advantage of her in any way, I will make your life extraordinarily difficult. Do we understand each other?" "Completely, Mrs. Hartwell." "Good. Now tell me about your daughter. What schools is she considering?" The rest of the dinner was less tense, though Patricia never fully warmed to David. But she was civil, which Victoria later told him was practically effusive praise from her mother. "She called you interesting," Victoria said as they drove home. "That's her version of high approval. Your mother terrifies me. She terrifies everyone, but you stood up to her. You didn't let her intimidate you. That impressed her, even if she won't admit it." 2 weeks later, Emma had her surgery. It went perfectly, and David spent 3 days at the hospital with her, barely leaving her side. Victoria came every evening after work, bringing food and magazines and her presence. Emma, still groggy from medication, looked at Victoria with drugged clarity. "You really love my dad, don't you?" Victoria smiled. "I really do." "Good, because he deserves someone who sees how amazing he is. Most people just see a poor guy with a worn-out suit. You see who he really is." "So do you, Emma. You've always seen him." "Yeah, but I'm his daughter. I'm supposed to. You chose to see him. That's different." After Emma fell back asleep, Victoria and David sat in the uncomfortable hospital chairs, exhausted but content. "Your daughter is wise beyond her years," Victoria said. "She gets that from her. Mother, the stubbornness she gets from me." Victoria laughed quietly. "Good combination." She took his hand. "David, I've been thinking about something." "What?" "About the future. About us. About where this is going." David's heart rate picked up. "Okay. I know it's only been 6 months. I know we're still figuring this out. But I want you to know that I'm serious about this. About us. I'm not dating you casually or seeing where it goes. I'm in this for the long term if that's what you want." 2. David brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "That's exactly what I want. You and Emma are my family now. Everything else is just details. Even when those details include my terrifying mother, even then, they sat there in the quiet hospital room, holding hands, watching Emma sleep, and feeling the future settling around them like a comfortable blanket. A year later, David stood in Victoria's penthouse apartment, nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first day at Hartwell. Global. Emma was there, grinning at him encouragingly. Patricia Hartwell was there too, having flown in for the occasion with an expression that was almost warm. Victoria came out of her bedroom wearing a simple black dress, looking beautiful and professional and like everything David had never dared to hope for. "Is everyone ready?" she asked. They took a car to a small restaurant in the North End, the Italian place where they'd had their first real date outside of work. Victoria had reserved the entire restaurant for the evening, just their small group and the staff. Over dinner, David told stories that made Victoria laugh, the same stories he'd been telling her for a year, but that never seemed to get old. Patricia even cracked a smile once or twice. Emma beamed with pride, seeing her father happy and confident and completely himself. When dessert arrived, David stood up. His hands were shaking slightly. "Victoria, there's something I want to say, and I'm going to say it in all 9 languages because that's who I am, and you've never asked me to be anyone different." He started in English, "I love you," then Spanish, "Te amo," Arabic, "Ahibuk," "Uhibuka," French, "Je t'aime," Portuguese, "Eu te amo," Mandarin, "Wo aini," German, "Ich liebe dich," Russian, "Я тебя люблю," Italian, "Ti amo." Victoria's eyes were already filled with tears. David knelt down, pulling out a ring he'd saved 6 months to buy. It wasn't the biggest diamond or the most expensive ring, but it was beautiful, and it was real, and it was all his. "Victoria Hartwell, you saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when I thought I had no value. You loved me when it was complicated and difficult and socially awkward. You made me believe in myself again. Will you marry me?" Victoria was crying openly now. "Yes, absolutely yes." David slipped the ring on her finger and she pulled him up to kiss him. Emma cheered. The restaurant staff applauded. Even Patricia dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, though she'd probably deny it later. "I have one condition," Victoria said when they finally broke apart. "Anything. Teach me Arabic and Mandarin and all the others. I want to understand your world the way you've learned to understand mine." "Deal. Starting tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Victoria agreed. "Tonight we celebrate." They celebrated until late into the night, surrounded by the people who mattered most. David called his daughter over at one point and hugged her tight. "Thank you, Em, for supporting me through everything, for believing in me. Dad, you showed me what it means to never give up, to stay true to yourself even when life gets hard. You think I learned that from anyone else?" She wiped her eyes. "I'm so proud of you. Mom would be proud too." "I hope so. I really hope so." 3 months later, David and Victoria were married in a small ceremony at a garden in Connecticut. Patricia helped plan it, which was either a blessing or a trial, depending on the day. Ahmed al-Rahman flew in from Saudi Arabia to attend, bringing a wedding gift of an antique Arabic manuscript that David nearly cried over. Emma was Victoria's maid of honor, standing beside her future stepmother with pride and joy. The ceremony was conducted partially in English and partially in Arabic, honoring both David's heritage and his skills. When David said his vows, he spoke in 9 languages again, each one a promise of love and commitment. Victoria responded in Sachom, English, then haltingly in Arabic. She'd been practicing for months, saying, "I promise to spend my life learning from you, loving you, and seeing you for exactly who you are." At the reception, David's former colleague from the rideshare company, Maria, came up to him. "Look at you now. From driving people around to marrying a CEO. That's quite a journey." "The journey was always there," David said. "I just needed someone to see it." He looked across the room at Victoria, who was laughing with Emma about something. She caught his eye and smiled, that private smile that was just for him. A year and a half ago, David had been a poor father who'd walked into a CEO's office expecting to be dismissed. He'd been invisible, undervalued, forgotten by a world that judged people by their credentials instead of their character. Now he was Dr. David Miller. Victoria had insisted he finally get his doctorate officially recognized through an executive program. Husband to the woman he loved, stepfather to his brilliant daughter, and director of one of the most successful international operations divisions in Boston. But more importantly, he was seen. He was valued. He was exactly who he'd always been, just finally in a place where that was enough. Victoria crossed the room to him, took his hand, and pulled him onto the dance floor. "What are you thinking about?" she asked as they swayed to the music. "About how I got here. About how one interview changed everything." "It wasn't the interview that changed everything. It was you. You were brave enough to knock on that door even knowing I'd probably dismiss you. You were brave enough to speak up about the contract, even when you had nothing to gain. You were brave enough to be yourself." She kissed him softly. "That's what changed everything." "I love you," David said in English. "I love you too," Victoria replied in Arabic, her pronunciation perfect. They danced surrounded by family and friends, by colleagues who'd become supporters, by a future that was bright and uncertain and full of possibility. And somewhere in the cosmos, David's mother, who'd taught him his first language all those years ago, surely smiled, because her son had finally come home, not to a place, but to himself. And that was worth more than 9 languages, more than any fortune, more than anything money could buy. That was worth everything.